To know that I've worked consistently the entire time and haven't made much headway at all is just really bewilders me.
A hefty debt in the tens of thousands of dollars has been haunting Dee Marshman for nearly 30 years.
I've had this debt hanging over me since I was 17. I'm nearly 46 now, and it feels like it's been a life sentence.
In 1997, Dee was in her first year of university when she was offered a student loan. Now known as the Student Financial Supplement Scheme, the loan allowed young people on welfare payments such as Austudy and Youth Allowance to help pay for everyday expenses.
So there had been a very serious recession in the early 1990s. By 1993, we're starting to come out of it, but it's still a relatively bad economic period. And so I think this was designed as part of a general review of the student income support system as a way of delivering them extra cash.
But there was a catch. Those signing up had to trade in their welfare payments. Here's how it worked. For every $1 they received as welfare from the government, they had to give it back. And in return, they received twice the amount as a loan. In other words, they effectively doubled their money and had to pay double back. After 10 years in operation, the Howard government scrapped the scheme in 2003, calling it a debt trap. Today, more than 20 years later, around 140,000 Australians in the scheme still owe $2.1 billion to the government collectively. At the time, Dee was struggling and she thought the loan would help her.
Well, when I was 17, I experienced homelessness. I was thrown out of home. I was coming out of a very dysfunctional family environment. At the time I signed up the loan, I had no money, no resources. I didn't even have many personal belongings. I remember I did have to move house once and I moved in a shopping trolley. I had a single bed mattress which I put on top of it and I rolled it across the street.
Dee chose to trade in most of her welfare payments over 5 years, so $17,000 became $34,000.
I remember it sounded like a solution for me at the time. Of course, looking back retrospectively, I didn't have any financial literacy at the age of 17. You can see the indexation here.
The loan was indexed, adding the rate of inflation as a percentage to the debt each year. So far, Dee's indexation has totalled more than $13,000.
I was actually at university and we were in a lecture theatre and it was presented to us, this concept of Student Financial Supplement Scheme, and it sounded great. It wasn't presented as a loan, it wasn't presented as a debt.
Did you fully understand what you were signing up for?
I honestly didn't fully understand what I was signing up for.
About 350 people in the scheme have now registered their interest in a potential class action against the government, led by lawyer Andrew Grech.
Majority of the people that have contacted us so far were under the age of 18, but the youngest that I've seen was 16. These were young people, these were vulnerable people, these were people who were not fully informed of the nature of the legal obligations they were being asked to enter into. They were people who could not have understood what the results or outcomes of that would be, and as a result of that, it's left them in a position which no one intended.
Andrew Grech also believes the Commonwealth Bank has a case to answer. The bank administered the loans for a 5-year period before the government took control of them.
In order for someone to enter into an agreement, they actually need to understand its terms, and it's incumbent on a financial institution like a bank and like a government agency to ensure that they're entering into that contract on a fully informed basis and that the terms are not unfair or unconscionable.
The Commonwealth Bank declined to answer our detailed questions, but pointed out that the government was responsible for the scheme.
It was a bit of an unusual scheme to hand out a government benefit this way, but nevertheless they were doing something for the government, implementing the government's policy for them.
Deb Woodbridge is another former student who owes money from the scheme.
I just can't believe it's still going.
Her debt started at $35,000 but peaked at $42,000 with indexation. It's taken her 20 years to pay it down to $7,500.
Seemed like it would be amazing, especially at the time when I was a well, a broke-ass student, that it would make things so much easier. I didn't really understand what this loan was about, and that I was going to have to pay back double, and that I'd only have to pay back half that. Yeah, not what I actually traded, not my welfare entitlement.
Earlier this month, the federal government promised to cut HECS debt by 20% by June next year. That discount would also apply to the Student Financial Supplement Scheme. But the government is resisting calls from the Greens and others to wipe the debt from the scheme.
I think they should wrap up this scheme and end the heartache that's caused all of these people.
We're in a cost of living crisis, and I think it's the ethical thing to do to wipe the Student Financial Supplement Scheme.
Higher education expert Andrew Norton says any successful legal action against the scheme could set a bad precedent for Australia's broader student loan system.
So you could argue that many students, probably most students who've borrowed under all the different loan schemes we've had over the last 30-something years, would have some element of not fully understanding what they are doing. And therefore, if you say there's someone simply didn't understand the full terms of the loan, that could open sort of the gates to almost everyone saying, actually, no, I didn't understand. Whereas really, I think that would be an impossible situation for the government, and therefore they would have to go back to their legal standing, which is, you did actually agree to this.
But because the rate of repayment in the scheme is so low, he argues there could be a political solution. Of the $2.1 billion owed, the government says only $180 million is likely to be repaid.
Realistically speaking, if someone's made no repayments for a very extended period of time, the government's not going to get the money back anyway, and it's simply being honest, this is a bad debt, write it off.
The Social Services Minister, Amandarishworth, declined to be interviewed, but told us the loans are repayable once an individual's income reaches the student loan threshold. The intention of this system is to protect people from repayment obligations by basing their repayments on their capacity to repay rather than the total value of their debts. Dee is continuing to chip away at her debt, which is now down to $18,000.
I think that it's the Prime Minister's responsibility to address this. Otherwise, all we're going to see is the cultivation of generational poverty.